The vote is 4-3. The motion does pass.
Another legislative map makes it through the Redistricting Commission, but is it good enough to get the state Supreme Court stamp of approval? Plus, hear from people who were in Ukraine when Russia first invaded, and we look at how the crisis overseas will impact Ohio. And putting the brakes on the distracted driving happening in our state. What change lawmakers hope will save lives. We thank you so much for joining us for Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. We will soon find out how charming that third time is for the Ohio Redistricting Commission. After missing several important deadlines and facing the threat of being held in contempt of court, the Redistricting Commission agreed to a new legislative district map. Their vote was 4-3, with the two Democrats and Auditor Keith Faber, a Republican, voting no. This means if approved by the state Supreme Court, the map would hold for 4 years instead of 10. Faber sent a statement after the vote saying, quote, "This is a constitutional process, and I've consistently expressed my concerns with the maps, including the Democrat proposed map we saw last week that violate the Constitution with unnecessary splits and by compromising compactness to achieve a specific ratio." Again, that is from State Auditor Keith Faber. State Representative Allison Russo, one of the two Democrats on the commission, had this to say before the vote.
I would ask to the commissioners, do the majority of the commissioners believe that this map, which actually worsens partisan asymmetry, it does not improve it, will satisfy the court and show that the commissioners, each member of this commission, when we appear on Tuesday before the court, is not contemptuous of the court and does not remain in contempt or possibly in contempt?
Well, as I've indicated to the press, I'm not commenting on pending litigation, and I don't think it's wise for anybody to do that.
Mr. Co-Chair, I'm sorry, but we're sitting here because of pending litigation discussing these maps. So I would disagree with that.
On Tuesday, the commission will have to appear in front of the state Supreme Court and explain why they believe they should not be held in contempt for failing to agree on a map in time. One of Ohio's 7 Supreme Court justices won't weigh in on this matter. Justice Pat DeWine, the son of Governor Mike DeWine. Justice DeWine told us that he would recuse himself if sanctions were to be imposed. Right now, the future of the May 3rd primary is in jeopardy. There's a chance that we would need more than one primary because the maps aren't ready. 10 TV's Kevin Landers asked Secretary of State Frank LaRose about that earlier this week.
Tell the boards of elections that they are to start working on preparing to conduct the election with the statewide races and with the local races. That's based on the opinion that I got from the Attorney General. That's what we have to work with. And so the boards of elections are now proceeding to conduct the election with the statewide races and with those county races as well.
So we have 2 primaries. Will we have one in May and then potentially another at another date? And what's that going to cost the taxpayer to have 2 primaries?
Yeah. As we've talked about, that's not a decision that I make. That's the decision that the General Assembly makes. The General Assembly has the opportunity, if they want to move the date to something in June, for example. They could keep that as a unified primary if they chose to do that. Again, the decision is theirs. And you're right, it does cost something to run an additional primary. I've also made that clear. We know that our boards of elections are resource constrained, right? They don't have it in the budget to run an additional election. And so if there were to be the decision by the General Assembly to have a bifurcated primary, 2 separate primaries, then there would be a cost associated with that. And I, for one, would be advocating that we need to get them the resources to help recoup those costs.
Now, to get a feel for the issues an additional primary would cause, here's Aaron Sellers with the Franklin County Board of Election.
There's a myriad of issues with a second primary, and again, I don't want to. Our hope is that won't happen, and we're still waiting, hopefully, to have a one unified date to have a primary. But if there were to be a second primary, the cost could be rather significant, not only for us here in Franklin County, but across the state. I've heard the number of $20 to $25 million that it would cost for another election statewide. I know that I've heard that the Secretary of State is talked about funding mechanisms from the state to help out counties, because obviously that's not something that county commissioners built into their yearly budgets last year. Logistics is another concern. Polling locations, supply chain issues. We've had some issues with paper and toner and the things of that like. The other issue would be voter confusion. Summer elections tend to have low turnouts because people have other things to do. And that's not the time frame that they have in their mind that an election's going on. So those are some of the things that why we hope to just have one.
We will, of course, keep you updated on any potential changes to the May primary, as well as what the state Supreme Court has to say about that latest map. Download the free 10 TV app and sign up to get breaking news alerts sent straight to your phone. Now to the crisis in Ukraine. U.S. Senator Rob Portman called the Russian invasion into Ukraine an illegal, unjustifiable assault. After the initial attack, President Biden issued strict sanctions on Russia. With support from NATO, the U.S. has cut off Russia's government from certain assets. To get a better feel for what's happening in Ukraine, 10 TV's Brian Somerville talked with someone who was there when the invasion started. That man, like so many others, is fearful, confused, and wondering what to do next.
Early Thursday morning, a wake-up call he never wanted.
And I understood that it was definitely explosions. It was far away, but almost. I just got that it started.
Igor Vershinian is in Kyiv. He says after realizing what he was hearing was the onset of a Russian invasion, he took cover.
I just moved to a safest place in my apartment just to be sure that there is will not be any danger if something will hit nearby.
He says he packed emergency supplies, food, money, while constantly looking for information to allow him to be up to date on developments. He talked with relatives, trying to figure out the next move.
I'm trying to keep calm, and the next step will be that I will go to donate my blood and donate my money to Ukrainian army.
Vershinian says people have been told the Ukrainian army is reliable and strong and will be able to protect their country. Yet he recognizes the Ukrainian military is young, only starting to build in 2014 when he says Russian separatists began to occupy eastern Ukraine.
Do you feel safe? Do you feel scared?
Not really. I'm just I'm a bit nervous about this situation because it's totally nonsense. You can imagine this. This is the second time that someone trying to take my home.
After the Soviet Union was dissolved in the early 1990s, Ukraine was part of the Budapest Memorandum that was signed in 1994, where Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States agreed in exchange for Ukraine giving up nuclear weapons, they were assured sovereignty and border security. Vershinian says with Russia now invading, diplomacy is out the door.
It's totally making a new world where agreements doesn't work.
And he worries if Russia takes Ukraine, other countries having no consequences will follow suit. Bryant Somerville, 10 TV News.
And he also says that if people want to get involved, they should donate. We have some resources for you to directly do that to help Ukraine. You'll find those at 10tv.com. Now, Bryant covered a little bit of the history of the complicated relationship between Russia and Ukraine. This conflict spans decades. 10 TV's Angela Ann takes a look at how we got to this point.
To fully understand the situation, you need to go back to 1991. That's when Ukraine voted for independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1994, Ukraine gave all their nuclear warheads to Russia. Ukraine joined NATO's Partnership for Peace, and Russia, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom signed an agreement to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. In 1997, NATO and Ukraine established a partnership. Then, in 2004, the Orange Revolution happened. A divide emerged between a presidential race between those who wanted to keep ties with NATO and the West and those who wanted to align with Russia. 2 rounds of a flawed election led to protesters dressed in orange who pushed for a revote, which Western-oriented Viktor Yushchenko won. In 2008, NATO denied Ukraine a way to membership after Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed opposition. 5 years later, protests began in Kyiv after Ukraine's president withdrew from EU talks. The following year, Ukraine protesters overthrew the president, Viktor Yanukovych, launching a pro-Western revolution. Fast forward now to 2020, Ukraine was named a NATO Enhanced Opportunities Partner. At the end of last year, Putin demanded a ban on NATO expansion and insisted that Ukraine never be accepted into NATO. That brings us to today, with Russia recognizing Ukraine's separatist regions and invaded Ukraine.
Russia and Ukraine are 5,000 miles away from Ohio, but despite that distance, Russia's invasion can still reverberate right here in central Ohio. 10 TV's Kevin Landers explains how all of this will impact your wallet.
Russia is a major producer of oil and natural gas, 10 million barrels of oil per day, or 12% of the global demand. While the U.S. imports very little of it, a change in the price of oil can impact prices globally and here in central Ohio. Peter Hahn is a professor of history at Ohio State.
Which is going to increase the price of oil in world markets, and that will boil down to a hike in the price that we see at the neighborhood gas pump.
Experts say gas prices here could go beyond $4 a gallon if oil prices increase to $120 a barrel. Now let's turn to wheat. Russia and Ukraine are responsible for 30% of global wheat exports. Ukraine is also a major producer of barley and vegetable oil, which goes into many of the products we eat. While food costs can play a small part in inflation, it's unclear what this will do to prices in the future. Your investments may also take a hit because of war in Ukraine, including your 401k. War makes Wall Street nervous and investors start to sell.
So the value of portfolios will be volatile and diminishing here for at least some period of time.
Russia is also a major exporter of critical metals like palladium, platinum, and nickel, key elements in microchips. Microchips are already in short supply globally, and further shortages could push prices of cars and other electronics higher. For now, it's uncertain how badly the war in Ukraine could damage the American economy.
It is the largest and most unsettling invasion in Europe since the end of World War II.
10 TV's Kevin Landers reporting there. Ohio does do business with Russia. We import pig iron that helps make steel. Total imports are about $344 million. We also export about $135 million worth of goods to Russia. The photos and videos of what is happening in Ukraine are a lot to take in. In the middle of all of that, a lot of disinformation spreading across your social media feeds. To verify, 10 TV's Lindsay Mills has some fast facts on the crisis in Ukraine.
The first claim, Russia is defending ethnic Russians in Ukraine. This is false. Our source is the U.S. Department of State. According to the State Department's website, there are no credible reports of any ethnic Russians or Russian speakers being under threat from the Ukrainian government. The claim, Ukraine is a threat to Russia. This is false. Our source, Dr. Anthony DeStefanis, Associate Professor of History at Otterbein University.
Putin has claimed over and over again over the last days and weeks that Ukraine is a threat to Russia, and therefore he's trying to come up with a sort of like a justification. The accurate way to understand this is that this is a war of choice.
Next, this photo shows a Russian aircraft downed by Ukraine. It appears in tweets like this one that has more than 10,000 likes. This is false. The photo is a mirrored image of the original taken decades ago. Our source, a reverse image search, reveals this photo has been posted online well before this latest invasion. It was posted by Flickr user Carl Ford. And a fiery explosion at a building claims to show the beginning of the attack on Ukraine. This is also false. It comes from posts like this one on Facebook. Our source, a reverse image search, shows us this is from Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip last May. Have something you'd like us to verify? Send us an email to verify@10tv.com. With your Verify, I'm Lindsay Mills.
There's a push in the Ohio House to crack down on distracted driving. Hear from one mother who hopes House Bill 283, if passed, will prevent parents from losing a child the way she did. Plus, chances are you or someone you know has dealt with delayed or missing mail lately. How Congresswoman Joyce Beatty plans to get to the bottom of that problem. Distracted driving is one of the most dangerous things you can do while behind the wheel. According to the National Traffic Highway Safety Administration, nationwide, distracted driving kills on average 9 people each day. Here in Ohio, there's a bill working its way through the House that would strengthen distracted driving laws. 10 TV's Richard Solomon has more from one mother and why this fight is so personal for her.
August 29th, 2014. At 3:40 in the afternoon.
That moment in time is one Kathy Richardson will never forget.
At 15:40 in the afternoon. I thought I was having a heart attack and I hadn't had enough water to drink that day. Turns out that wasn't the case.
Her heart in human form. Her son, Nathan Richardson.
It was Nathan's right to stay alive, and that right was taken away from him by a distracted driver.
Her son's smile and pictures keep she and her husband, Doug, fighting for change in distracted driving laws.
What I see is bad behavior from so many people on the road.
That change could come from House Bill 283.
Right now, texting and driving can't be the sole reason why officers pull you over in the state of Ohio. But under this new bill, that would change. Even being behind the wheel with a phone in your hand would be enough.
House Bill 283 is extremely needed for Ohio's roadways.
Kimberly Schwind is a spokesperson for AAA. She says the organization supports the proposed bill. She says the state first passed the distracted driving legislation a decade ago. And as technology advances, the laws that are in place to keep people safe need to also.
Looking away from the road for just 2 seconds doubles your risk of crashing. And when you're looking at your phone, you're looking away for a whole lot longer than that.
Kathy will never forget that day in August, but she knows change moving forward honors him.
And that's why we are doing what we're doing. So another person, hopefully not one more person, has to drive behind a hearse bringing their son back to the funeral home.
That was Richard Solomon reporting. Nathan was a captain with the Air National Guard. Kathy says her son now has another set of wings and is still creating change. The fight against distracted driving is a personal mission for 10 TV's Dom Taberry. Through Maria's message in honor of his late daughter, Dom teaches young drivers the dangers of distracted driving. You can learn more about the program by going to 10tv.com/Maria's message. We are continuing to follow issues at the post office. We've heard from several of you that your mail is either late or not arriving at all. 3rd District Congresswoman Joyce Beatty promised to get you some answers. 10 TV's Olivia Eugenio looks into the issue.
For many of us, a trip to the mailbox means cards, letters, and unfortunately, bills. But for Jeff Fields, when he goes to the mailbox, he's getting things that are keeping him alive.
And it isn't arriving on time.
When Jeff Fields gets his mail, it's a whole lot of bills.
I seem to get a lot of those.
But what's missing?
I still haven't got the blood sugar medicine.
Is his medication.
I can't keep going on with this. I worry more about this than anything else.
So what does the Postal Service have to say? They sent us this statement, which is the same statement we were sent when we asked about the Postal Service over a month earlier. The Postal Service saying they are utilizing overtime to compensate for staffing issues brought on by the pandemic. They say the Postal Service is committed to providing the best possible service to our customers, and we apologize for any inconvenience that may have been experienced. past. Local management is aware of delivery issues in Columbus and is taking steps to address the concerns. We appreciate the patience of our customers and the efforts of employees during challenging times. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty also sharing frustrations, saying she's received complaints from constituents about the mail. She says she's working with USPS to do several audits to figure out the issue. She says these audits are the first step to restoring the rapid, reliable deliveries Americans should expect from their postal service. For now, customers like Jeff Fields will just have to wait.
No other way of getting my meds.
And hope things they need arrive on time. Olivia Eugenio, 10 TV News.
The Postal Service says they are also hosting job fairs every Wednesday through the end of March to try to hire more workers. We recently told you about a $50 million relief bill that made its way through the U.S. House that would help keep the Postal Service afloat. That piece of legislation has stalled in the Senate. New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer says the bill will eventually pass. He says it's just delayed. This week, we saw several Central Ohio cities and school districts drop their mask mandates. Up next, the Ohio Department of Health tells us what you need to think about before leaving your mask at home. Welcome back. The CDC significantly loosened federal face mask wearing guidelines, and this comes as those COVID-19 case numbers drop around the country and here in Ohio. But Dr. Bruce Vanderhoff of the Ohio Department of Health says when it comes to deciding if you should wear a mask or not, you need to look at what's happening in your community.
As schools, organizations, and businesses begin to consider easing their mitigation efforts, they should take into account conditions on the ground in the communities they serve. And their local health department is a very good resource for understanding those local conditions. But the onus is not just on institutions. In order to keep COVID-19 at bay, each of us over the days and weeks ahead needs to look carefully at what's happening in our community and the recommendations of local public health leaders there. And regardless of whether COVID-19 transmission is high or low where we live, we need to remember that, like so many other respiratory viruses, SARS-CoV-2 may fade, but it won't disappear. COVID-19 will be back, and we need to be well protected when it returns.
That protection is the COVID-19 vaccine. Right now, about 60% of all Ohioans are fully vaccinated. Because of the pandemic, this year's National Eating Disorder Awareness Week, which just wrapped up, had a special focus. Chances are you or someone you know has experience with an eating disorder. Experts are seeing a 15% increase in diagnoses in teens. The National Eating Disorder Association's helpline reports a 107% jump in calls since COVID. Health advocate Akia Red, who is in recovery from disordered eating, told me that it's never just about the food.
There's oftentimes some underlying PTSD, anxiety, depression that fuels you into this urgency or this sense of needing to be in control.
And Red says getting help, like therapy, is truly the first step. Now, if you or someone you know is dealing with an eating disorder, contact the NEDA, N-E-D-A helpline online by visiting myneda.org/helpline. You can also call or text NEDA to the number that is on your screen. Thank you so much for joining us here on Face the State today. Have a great week.